creative visions and the respect for humanity.
Hello, I'm Frank Adams. They all call me Doc Adams. In fact, I've been around a good little while, and right now I'm sitting in the famous Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. And what we do here is we talk about the great musicians from Alabama, and also we have a strong interest in teaching young people how to play this thing called jazz. For instance, all the things that youngsters seem to be interested in. And jazz, of course, is America's original art form. And here we try to get it over to not only young people, but old people too, and those in between. Of course, I'm the director of education here, and what I'm doing today is talking a little bit about music and about the museum here, which is the first of its kind in the world because it honors musicians from Alabama, musicians from Birmingham, Alabama, musicians from all parts of Alabama, and what they had to do with this great music like jazz, you see. This great music is jazz. Great music is jazz. And of course, it all started back out of years, hundreds of years ago, with simple songs. Of course, that's really a religious song, just a closer walk with thee. But some of the older musicians started needing a little pep into it, so they would play it. Things like that, and we try to get that concept over because at the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame, we do teaching, lots of teaching. Teaching to young people, tell them about their past and what to look for in the future. And we've gotten to Charlie Parker and beyond. We've gotten to the avant-garde, players, and we always honor those in the past who gave us this music. And of course, you have to understand that jazz music is an original composition. Compositions are its original music created here in America, in our own country. And it's a part of our cultural fabric. It's a part of the way not just one group of Americans feel, but it's a group of everyone. I guess you could compare it to a gumbo that has a lot of ingredients in it, all put together to form this wonderful music that we call jazz. And one of the things that's different about this music is changing. Every day it's a different kind of thing. It's changing. Full of dissonance, full of rhythms, always changing, taking something from Spanish rhythms, taking something from African beats, taking something from all types of things. And it comes out in this big hodgepodge and glorious music we call jazz. And what happens is the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame recognizes that and honors that. We have a tradition here that we want to pass this legacy, this music on to young people. And we have classes in our educational program that does just that. If a child or adult is interested in playing this music, the door is open. We've been able to, so far, to furnish this service free of charge to students. All we ask for is their attention, and they study. Jazz is a free music. It's not constricted, it's not held within bounds. Even it defies bar lines, you see, because it's always growing, it's making up things. Improvisation, when I make up something. Just something that comes on the spur of the moment that you're thinking about. It reflects a mood, it reflects a rhythm, and that's the thing about jazz. It makes it such a different type of art form. Now, back in the early days, in fact, I was born in 1928, and when I came on the scene, Duke Ellington was wailing away at the Cotton Club. Johnny Hodges was playing alto saxophone, and there was the great Teddy Wilson. Billie Holiday was getting into singing. Bessie Smith was on the scene. All those great singers. So that was something that fascinated us youngsters then, and it fascinates youngsters now. Or the music may be a little different, but the roots are the same. It's the beginning that has been extended. It grows and grows and changes every day. That's why we want people to come and visit the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. Look us over and you'll see Nat King Cole in here. He's from Montgomery, Alabama. You'll see the great Bessie Smith. You see Donna Washington from Mobile, Alabama. And so many great singers. Laura Washington from Birmingham, Alabama. And who can forget the great Erskine Hawkins in Tuxedo Junction? Tuxedo Junction is really a place in Birmingham, but people don't realize it's in Inslee, Alabama. And the story is two streetcar tracks met together in a junction, and they had tuxedos to rent, and so they called it Tuxedo Junction. Of course, you know the theme. That's Tuxedo Junction. And of course, that's been played so many times. And every time it's played, there's something new that's in that particular song. That's a story that we'll talk about one day. Bama State Collegians and all those wonderful musicians like Hayward Henry and Johnny Grimes and the Bascom brothers, Paul and Dud, and all those great ones who have gone on. And they've left a few of us to tell that story. So hopefully you'll come to the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame and you'll get a chance to visit and see all these wonderful things right down in the heart of Birmingham on 4th Avenue. So I'm looking forward to seeing you. And this is not the end of our discussion, but today we want you to have a good time and look at this film and be sure to come and see us. You got to realize that Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame was not always here. It was really the dream of a man by the name of J.L. Lowe, James L. Lowe. And Mr. Lowe had a dream that he wanted the musicians that he thought so much of, and he knew he felt that they ought to be enshrined in this museum, the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. This was back in 1978. The musicians were inducted into the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. First of all, that was the great Erskine Hawkins. Remember that? Just Erskine Hawkins and Samuel Lowe, the fellow who wrote all the music for Erskine Hawkins' band. And that was the clarinet wizard Haywood Henry. They did so many solos on Erskine Hawkins' recordings. And then there was the teacher of all teachers, John T. Fess Watley. Hundreds and hundreds of students Professor Watley taught, including J.L. Lowe. So, in 1917, Professor Watley started teaching at Tuggle Institute, and that's where it all started. When you visit the museum, you see hundreds of students that Fess Watley taught. In fact, he's one of the focal points of the museum. And that's what you need to look at when you come here. And of course, we'll all show you Fess, and you'll understand why he made so many musicians famous. And then on that picture, of course, you have to recognize, as I said before, the greats on there. Erskine Hawkins, Samuel Lowe, Haywood Henry, and one teacher that nobody can forget, and that was Mr. Amos Gordon, played with Louis Armstrong. Professor Amos Gordon, I remember during the Second World War, he sit me down and say, hold your horn that way. You don't want to do it that way. Do it the right way. Amos Gordon, a great, great teacher. And of course, Professor Watley taught him. And I've named them all on there now, except one last one, and that's me, Frank Adams. They all call me Doc Adams, and I'm real happy because I'm left to tell their story. I'm the only one left. They all have gone in the great band in the sky, and I remain here to sort of tell you something about them. So you got to come down now, and you got to visit the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame to see these great masters of music.
You are the one, only beneath the moon under the sun. Whether near to me or far, doesn't matter where you are, I think of you. Night and day, night and day. Why is it so that this longing for you follows wherever I go? In the roaring traffic boom, in the silence of my lonely room, I think of you. Night and day, under the heart of me. There's such a hot yearning burning inside of me. And that storm it won't be through. Shall I sing my
wasn't always easy, but there was something strange about music in Birmingham, even during the civil rights movement. Musicians, particularly jazz musicians, always respected each other, so it wasn't a big problem of us getting together and having what you call a jam session. But behind all that was this feeling of equality. In fact, we had a musicians union to start off with. It was separated like all the musicians unions across the country, but that didn't stop the black and whites from playing together, particularly jazz musicians. Now, during the civil rights era, and of course, music was a great part of it. And if you watch those marches, you see Jews, Italians, blacks, whites marching together down 16th Street or 4th Avenue, singing "We shall overcome," and all those great Negro spirituals. In fact, when Dr. King said, "Thank God at last, free at last, free at last," thank God, free at last. That was a part of a Negro spiritual. And of course, jazz is like that. It was made up of the rhythms, the dialect, and all those type of things. But it had a component that was much needed in our civilization, in our life, and that was what we call the inclusiveness of all people, regardless of race. And that's one of the beautiful things about jazz music. It's always accepted, even the time of Benny Goodman, when he had Lionel Hampton, who was from Birmingham, Alabama, in his band, the great Teddy Wilson. All those great players contributed to the music and also contributed to the longevity of this music. Now, what specifically happened is, in the schools, we had bands. In fact, I was teaching school at that time. And I'm speaking of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. In 60s, we would let students out of school to take part in those marches. It was a thing to do. There was no question. I'd turn my back and the class was empty. And they would go right down 8th Avenue to 16th Street Park, which was called the Battleground at that time. And so the first induction ceremony for the Hall of Fame was in 1978. And then its present place on 4th Avenue in the Carver Theater was established in 1993. So it was all designed 1 year after the Civil Rights Museum. So that shows you the importance and connection of this type of music with the Civil Rights movement. And if you visit the Civil Rights Museum, you'll hear some singing in there by some jazz musicians, particularly Henry Blankenship. All those were in the Civil Rights movement. And the music was one of the most important parts of the music. And if you went to one of those rallies, you heard spirited music, not just music that's slow, but you heard music. Not just slow, somber music like a dirge, but you heard happy music. Even in the strife, there was happiness. There was gloriousness in the struggle. And music played such an important part about it. And of course, the details are in the songs. Hundreds and hundreds of songs, not only made up by Birmingham musicians, but musicians from all over the world. We had so many of them that I can't name right offhand, but they had a great part in that movement. There's always been something between musicians. The music seems to connect us all and join us in a feeling and a being of unity. The artist, the person who loves music and it gets in his heart and his soul, it's very difficult to find that person discriminating against anyone. We are all so much alike. We are all brothers, and this music is the thing that really sets us apart from a lot of persons that are not so blessed to have music in their lives.
I hope you thoroughly enjoyed today's program and that it does have a positive impact on your life. If we can find a way to make the whole world a better place,